Hello everyone, welcome to Game Spider. For my first video of the channel, I would like to talk about Baldi's Basics Plus, a game that will definitely be covered more on this channel. More specifically, I will be taking a look at the development history of the game. Judging by what I have seen, not many people on YouTube have covered the history of Baldi's Basics after version 0.4, so I hope that this video will deliver some well-needed information about the more recent history. This video will cover the history up to version 0.13, which is the current version at the time of writing the script. Note that this video will primarily focus on Baldi's Basics Plus, although other games in the franchise will be mentioned occasionally. This is also my first video of the channel, so the video quality probably won't be as high as my future videos. I definitely plan on making a video on the history of the entire Baldi's Basics franchise, but I will be saving that for a time when I have a bit more experience in making YouTube videos. But with that out of the way, let's get started with a dive into Baldi's Basics Plus development history. Let's start where it all began with the 2018 Meta Game Jam. By then, Micah McGonigal, the creator of Baldi's Basics, already had something floating in his mind for quite a while. He wanted to make a roguelike stealth horror game that parodies cheap 90s educational software. This game would feature a character from the Baltimore comics that he drew as a kid, a bald man named Baldi. In the Meta Game Jam, Micah saw a good opportunity to create this game under the stage name of Mistman 12, or Mistman for short. His original idea was to create randomly generated levels with the intention of making a game where players would have to constantly adapt to the unpredictable, ever-changing circumstances. However, due to having a limited time of just 14 days, Mistman had to scrap the idea and take a more generic approach, having a pre-built map. And that's how Baldi's Basics in Education and Learning was created, and Mistman called it a day. But then the unthinkable happened. Baldi's Basics took the world by storm. It got hundreds of thousands of downloads, and even top-class YouTubers like Markiplier and DanTDM started playing it. With this sudden popularity, Mistman saw an opportunity to create a full game just like he had originally planned. So in July 2018, he founded his own studio named Basically Games and started the development of the full game, which would later be titled Baldi's Basics Plus. He also launched a Kickstarter campaign to fund this huge project. Sadly, the popularity of Baldi's Basics died down after that, like with all trends. But for Mistman, this was not the end. In fact, it was just the beginning. Over the next 2 years, Mistman worked steadily on the game he wanted to make for a long time, releasing several demos in the process. I would like to cover them briefly here. Starting off with the Field Trip demo that released on July 24th, 2018, just after the launch of the Kickstarter campaign. This demo showcased the field trip concept that would be in the full game. There, the player would go camping with Baldi, having to keep a campfire alive by throwing logs in it. The full game public demo was released on August 12, 2019, and it featured a pre-made map just in Baldi's Basics Classic, but with some features that were not in the original games, such as some new items and structures, a playground, and 5 random events. The Kickstarter exclusive demo was released on November 2nd, 2019, and was exclusive to Kickstarter backers who donated at least $30. It was basically just an earlier version of the full game, containing 3 randomly generated levels and even 2 field trips. It even got updates with more new features until Baldi's Basics Plus would release in early access. Finally, the Challenges demo released on March 31st, 2020, showcasing another mode that would be in the full game, Challenges. It featured 3 of such challenges: Speedy, Stealthy, and Grapple. On June 12, 2020, Mistman deemed his game to be finished enough to release in early access, starting the early access period of development. Version 0.1 is the earliest publicly available version of Baldi's Basics Plus. It was complete with hide and seek, endless mode, field trips, and challenges. Hide and Seek only had 3 floors, Johnny's Store was not implemented yet, and there were still a lot of placeholder textures. Endless Mode only had 2 levels, the randomly generated Endless Random and the pre-made Endless Medium. The challenges were just imported from the Challenges demo without any changes I'm aware of, and only the first version of the camping and farm field trips were present. Mistman's plan was to create a major early access update every 2 to 3 months and release minor updates continually, which he did going from June to November of 2020. Update 0.1.1 to 0.1.3 made a number of small tweaks and bug fixes. 0.1.4 made some larger changes, such as properly adding Baldi's countdown and reworking the whirlpools from the Flood event. 0.1.5 made more small tweaks and bug fixes. Update 0.2 was the first major update the game got, releasing on September 12, 2020. This update implemented Johnny's store, but it was wildly different from its current version. It was just a 2D screen, and it was located inside the elevator. This update also meant to re-add First Prize, but a bug prevented him from actually spawning. Several new events were planned, but only Gravity Chaos made it into this update. A new field trip was also planned, but later scrapped, as Mistman wanted to rework existing field trips to make them actually enjoyable before adding any new ones. Lastly, many placeholder textures were replaced by their final versions. 0.2.1 was released the day after, and fixed the bug so that First Prize can actually spawn. Another week after that, 0.2.2 released with more small tweaks and bug fixes. On November 21st, Update 0.3 released, titled the Speed Update. This update increased the player's movement speed to better fit with Baldi's Basics Plus gameplay. Baldi's speed also got fine-tuned along with it, now having a separate curve for each level. The detention timer was also meant to count down faster, but this was left unimplemented. Besides that, field trips got their first revision, and the second version of the camping field trip was released. The save and quit feature was also added, and the ending got updated. 0.3.1 was a sole bug fix update, and 0.3.2 released the second version of the farm field trip, along with some more bug fixes. However, after version 0.3.2's release, Mistman realized that the game wasn't turning out the way he wanted. He had gathered quite some game design experience by then, and it was time for him to put that into practice. But to do that, he would need to halt his update schedule and take the time to make the game the way he wanted. This would start the second phase of early access development. There was something else Mistman started working on around that time. Since the original game felt quite rough to play, he thought about making a remaster of the game, using the new systems from Baldi's Basics Plus for a much smoother gameplay. This would also take time to develop. Moving into 2021, Mistman started working on the game design document, where he would list exactly how he wanted the final product to look like. However, he also realized that there were problems with the game that needed to be addressed more quickly, resulting in the release of Update 0.3.3 on June 25, 2021, which changed the way pre-built maps generate to make sure they update along with the rest of the game. The voice lines of Baldi and the principal will also be recorded for this update. 0.3.4 released 1 week after, which changed Mrs. Palm's behavior and fixed some more bugs. Baldi's Basics Classic Remastered was also planned to release around that time, but it was delayed to make sure it was a finished product. Now with the game design document finished, Mistman had a list of all the features that will be in the final product. He then started with basically recreating the game from scratch. On May 7, 2022, he showcased some of the new features with Update 0.3.5. This update greatly improved the game's UI, made the code more efficient to improve performance, and improved NPC collisions, among with many other tweaks and bug fixes. 0.3.6 released 1 week after, making many more tweaks and bug fixes. Another week later, Update 0.3.7 released, which mainly improved the game's control settings. On October 21, 2022, Baldi's Basics Classic Remastered was released 1.5 years after its originally planned release date. Now it was more of an expansion of the classic game rather than a remaster, containing 4 playstyles, many secrets, and story and horror elements. I won't be talking too much about any of that in this video, since this video is still primarily about Baldi's Basics Plus, but I suspect that Classic Remastered was meant to already give players a feeling of what the final version of Baldi's Basics Plus will be like in terms of secrets and lore. I like to see it as some sort of stepping stone from the classic game towards the full game. On November 4th, the final subversion of 0.3, version 0.3.8 was released. This update imported the changes made during the development of Classic Remastered over to Plus, such as the player being able to move slightly during playtime's minigame and being able to set the time for alarm clocks. For the entirety of 2023, Mistman was working on basically recreating the entire game for a much better gameplay experience, as well as making future development much easier. He was also busy creating a new character, Dr. Reflex, which he would put a lot more work into compared to any other character. Finally, on February 26, 2024, Update 0.4 was released. This was a massive update containing the new character Dr. Reflex, who had animated sprites from different angles. It also overhauled the level generator, with all rooms now having custom design instead of being randomly generated, added a proper sound propagation system, and significantly improved the map. This update also made numerous smaller additions and changes. 0.4.1 was released 1 week after, with more tweaks and bug fixes, such as reducing the frequency of Kickstarter backer posters. 0.4.2 was released sometime after that, with even more tweaks and bug fixes, such as increases typical boot duration. Now, with this game generally being much better, Mistman could finally go back to his standard update schedule, starting the third phase of early access development. For the following year, Mistman would work through his list of planned features, releasing one major update every 2 to 3 months. On May 6th, Update 0.5 dropped, which changed the way items are distributed in a level, alongside adding the first new item, the Nana Peel. It also balanced the way Y2Bs are earned, adding plus icons and power bonuses. 0.5.1 released 1 week after with more tweaks and bug fixes, such as faculty name tags no longer expiring during field trips. 0.5.2 released the day after, fixing some bugs related to captions. On July 12th, Update 0.6 released, which added the pit stop, a location between levels where the player could access Johnny's store and save and quit the game. Johnny's store was also changed into an actual room and could generate inside the level in endless mode. This update also added another new item, the Diet Bee Soda. It also improved the HUD and added many missing sounds. Field trips were temporarily removed in this update, as they were in the middle of their second rework. Sometime after 0.6.1 release, with again more tweaks and bug fixes, such as WD No Squee now silencing all sounds made in its area of effect. 0.6.2 released several days after that, with some more bug fixes. On September 9th, Update 0.7 released, adding the third version of the camping field trip in a brand new format. It was accessed from the pit stop and featured a 3D hub area with two playable 2D minigames. It also added yet another item, the bus pass, which is now required to go on field trips. But most importantly, this update added the 9-9 secrets. I suspect that this is a teaser of how some deep secrets of the final game will be like, but that is pure speculations from my end. 0.7.1 released some time after, which introduced the ability to give the bus pass to Johnny, and it also removed the 9-9 secret again. On December 9th, Update 0.8 released, adding the Lights Out event that will occur when the player spends too much time on the floor. It also made a lot of changes to the level generator, as well as adding a new structure, Fence. The update also introduced playstyles and map markers. Update 0.8.1 came sometime after, introducing the challenge options, or challenges, not to be confused with challenge maps, also called challenges. Moving into 2025, 0.9 released on February 10th, adding an interactive tutorial and a full hide-and-seek menu. It also made multiple save files available to all platforms. Update 0.9a released the day after, fixing a bug where the game would not return to the main menu after completing the tutorial. On April 21st, Update 0.10 released, and this was another big update. This update finally added more floors to hide and seek. Floors 4 and 5 can be one of three new level types, factory, laboratory, and maintenance. With those new level types, several new structures came as well. Besides that, this update also added other students and locked rooms. This update also completely reworked the test and swapped the pickled boots with the more modern techno boots. Update 0.10.1 released the day after, solely fixing bugs. Update 0.10.2 released some time after that, with more tweaks and bug fixes. After 0.10.2 released, Mistman had decided that he would now start working towards the final version, dedicating half of his time to the next update and the other half towards features that will be in the final version. This would start the next phase of early access development. On his March 10th status update, Mistman announced that he would start working towards the final version of the game after the release of version 0.10. His goal was to have an internal build of the final version of Hide and Seek ready before the end of 2025. Due to his shift of focus, the updates from there on will be much smaller. Mistman also thought of turning away from his studio being a one-man business, as he figured he could no longer handle all the work by himself. Update 0.11 released on June 30th, which completely revamped Endless Mode. The player could now play any level from hide and seek, and new items will spawn when collecting notebooks. The pre-made Endless Medium map was also removed. This update also added two new items, the Invisibility Elixir and the Super Stretchy Glove. This was the first update to not have any subversions. In the July 30th status update, Mistman announced that he had hired his first employee, Nayan Ramachandran. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, Nayan would work together with Mistman for a much smoother development, making basically games no longer considered a one-man studio. With that, Update 0.12 released on September 1st, adding two new educational activities, the Match Machine and Balloon Buster. These were required to solve in order to get the notebook, sort of adding long-awaited new subjects to the game. This update also introduced two new random events, Balderdash and Student Shuffle. This update also changed the way most characters work with invalid collisions. Update 0.12.1 released some time after that, with more tweaks and bug fixes, such as Beso that's no longer working when the player is squished. Update 0.12.2 updated to a newer version of Unity, solving a security vulnerability issue. Update 0.12.2a released just 2 hours later, removing some debug features that were accidentally left in the game. On November 11th, Update 0.13 released, finally adding long-awaited upgrades in the form of stickers. These stickers are selected randomly and the player must choose between what is available, really making the roguelike part of Baldi's Basics apparent. And there we are as of the writing of this script, but the story isn't over yet. At least one more major early access update is planned, Update 0.14, which won't add any new content, but will mainly focus on bug fixes and quality of life. After that, Mistman will start working on version 1.0, beginning another silent period. During this time, there might still be early access updates, but they will be much less frequent, with no regular schedule. It is unknown how long this update hiatus will last, but Mistman has stated that the game is still far from finished, so I think it will probably take at least a year or two. But after that, version 1.0 will release, being the official release of the game. The official release will contain story and horror elements, as well as stuff Mistman does not want to spoil. I think mobile and console reports will release simultaneously or shortly after. And then Baldi's Basics Plus will be finished, no longer receiving updates. Basically games will start working on other games, but the story of Baldi's Basics will finally come to an end. And there I must conclude this video. As said earlier, this is my first video of the channel, so if you have any feedback to improve my future videos, please leave that in the comments below. It will be highly appreciated. I plan on making videos like this one in the future, so keep an eye out for that if you wish to. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.